And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, again from Ireland. I've got the Irish Sea behind me. I'm Trish Regan. It's the Trish Regan Show. So good to be with you here. We've got a little bit of good news. I mean, it's not all good, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but a little bit of good news that I want to get to momentarily regarding the polls. Plus, we're learning things that we probably shouldn't learn about Tim Walz. Thank you very much. And his military service is clearly very much under fire. We got to talk about what's going on within the squad because another one just bit the dust. Could Rashida be next? I wonder. Great to have you here. Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share, all of that good stuff. We got some pretty big news to get to. And that's a couple of polls that have just come out. Now, again, I'm not the kind to sugarcoat anything, but I do look for the silver lining, right? I'm looking for good news where I can find it. And there are a couple little things that I do want to share with you. Look, you have to face the reality that Kamala Harris is going into the DNC thing. She just got her VP pick. I mean, they came to us 100 days before the election, right? And suddenly announced who was going to be running for president. That being what it is, there's a danger here that there's enthusiasm and it's not matched by any kind of due diligence on the part of the media, etc., so that they really drill down and figure out who this woman is. So as people get caught up in the momentum, sure, you start to see polls shift. But here's the good news for Donald Trump. And I want to get to that. Take a look at this that just came in. This is a Reuters Ipsos poll. And what it's showing you is that in one state in particular, he's succeeding quite well with one particular group. Well, we got a few polls to get to. I mean, there's also, you can see this one, again, Reuters Ipsos, a new poll of Americans living in the swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada finds that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are in this statistical dead heat. So it's like super tight, razor thin margin. Let me tell you, if she was a good candidate, it wouldn't be super tight. Are you kidding me? Why should it be super tight? I mean, it's Donald Trump, for goodness sakes. People would have any excuse in the world, theoretically, not to vote for him, right? Well, it's Kamala Harris he's running against, and she's not the best candidate, like it or not, okay? And she's done a terrible job on the border. She's done a terrible job on the economy, and people know that. They don't want to get more of the same with Joe Biden. Now, Kamala Harris, or should I say Barack Obama behind the scenes pulling all the strings. So they don't want it. They don't want it. That's why she's not even doing better. She should be doing better. Again, you've got a honeymoon going on. This woman should be killing it, but that's not the case. So again, Reuters Ipsos showing us that this is a statistical dead heat. It is razor thin. And she might, on the margin, be coming out like a point or two ahead right now, but I don't think that's going to last. I think this is the excitement. This is the media enthusiasm. And then once they figure out, oh, maybe Tim Walz didn't really do what he said he did in the military. Or maybe these people are sort of crazy leftists a la what you might get down in the likes of Venezuela. I mean, seriously, people are going to wonder about them. We've got some information coming out about just exactly how they were running their censorship division over there at the Biden-Harris White House. All this stuff adds up. And not to mention Harris's point of view on Israel. I mean, that is definitely bucking the trend of what we've seen historically with Democrats. And that's why when you get to this very, very deep blue state, I'm talking New York, baby, I'm talking New York, what you see is, in fact, a lot of Jewish voters are pulling away from Kamala Harris. They're not going to vote for her. They're going to vote for Trump instead. And this is hard for people to admit, right? It's not like Trump polls especially well. He tends to have a much more of an undershowing, if you would, when it comes to the polls. But take a look. This is the headline. Trump takes stunning lead over Harris with surprising group in blue state. Vice President Harris, she's still ahead in New York. But listen, you know what? Biden was ahead by 7, so she's ahead by 14. Maybe New York's in play, maybe it's not. It's probably not, but I think this is a big deal because Jewish Americans are like, whoa, lady, come on. And now you got Waltz in there as well. So take a look at this. This is stunning because if you think historically of where Jewish voters have been, they've actually overwhelmingly supported Democrat candidates up until now. American Enterprise did a little bit of due diligence on this, American Enterprise Institute, and they found that Jewish voters overall have basically supported Democrats over Republicans by a margin of 71% to 26%, going all the way back to 1968. So all the way back to 1968, you had this overwhelming support. Well, guess what? Guess what? That has changed dramatically. That has changed so dramatically because now it's like flipped. Now Jewish voters are supporting Donald Trump. And it's in part because of this major issue being Israel. I want to get to another interesting poll that came out, which is showing that actually he's making gains with the white population. So I found this kind of interesting. This may be in part why she picked Tim Walz, although she could have picked Shapiro and maybe courted some favor with the Jewish population, but she went maybe with Walz because she's worried about this divide where a lot of white voters don't really see her as recognizing some of the issues that they consider to be really important, things like inflation, et cetera, as front and center. And so what you see is that he has actually picked up in the polls. I mean, that's amazing since she was announced. And so he's now actually gaining about 50% picked Trump in July polls. That's up from 46% in May and June. So I think it's quite possible that a lot of white Americans are saying, what the heck did you guys just do? I mean, we had Biden, we selected Biden, we went to the polls, we voted for Biden, and then you pulled a fast one and you gave us Kamala. And so I don't think this is triggered by race at all. I want to be careful about that. I actually think this is something that's sort of symptomatic of how a lot of Democrats feel. They're like, what just happened? And what just happened was they traded your candidate, guys. And so you should be frustrated. You should be upset. And so now you've got these very, very tight polls. But what you're finding is that he's breaking out with two groups in particular, with white Americans and with Jewish Americans. And I think that that matters because, again, we're not there yet. I mean, it's still a ways until November. And the more America sees of her, the more they're really not going to like her. I mean, look, she was yelling at some people there in Detroit at the rally they had. We'll get to that in a second. But I think once she's tested on some of these policy issues, there's not going to be a whole lot to see. They're not going to like this. In fact, when I went through her website, I couldn't believe it. I started showing it to friends and family. I'm like, wait a second. This is her website. Have you ever seen a political candidate in your entire life who literally has nothing on her website as far as policy goes? I certainly haven't. I've never seen anything like it. It's just mind-boggling. So here's this woman who comes along. She's got no policy chops whatsoever. She's a radical socialist, if you ask me. Certainly she's told us enough times how she feels on gender issues and trans issues and, you know, basically a redistribution of wealth issues. I mean, we know who she is. We know where she comes from, California. We know what we're going to get, sort of, because she's actually not trying to articulate that. I think she's afraid. I mean, this is a woman who's out there saying, oh, forget the Supreme Court. Who cares about the Supreme Court? We, meaning she and Biden, we can bypass that so that we can make sure that we can pay for all these kids' gender studies degrees, right? With your taxpayer dollars. She's pretty radical. She's pretty darn radical. And so the more people understand that, the more they find out who she is, I think you're really going to start to actually see, believe it or not, Trump pull ahead. He's doing an interview next week with Elon Musk. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that there are going to be some pockets of opportunities here. He's going beyond the mainstream media. Everybody's sick of the mainstream media, and he's got a shot. He really does. And these two polls that just came out, they really start to prove it. Meanwhile, consider what's going on with these crazy squad members, of which, you know, if Kamala could be, she would be one of them, right? If she was in the House of Representatives, I think she'd be part of the squad. Another squad member just bit the dust. This woman, Cori Bush, who was known for spending big time on her security, etc. She's no longer going to be running in the lovely state of Missouri. No, it's going to be Wesley Bell who's taking over there as the Democrat candidate. It's just like what happened in none other than New York in Jamal Bowman's district. Remember the guy that kept pulling the fire alarm, you know, because he didn't want an actual budget vote to happen? You can't make it up. So he wound up getting primaried. This was the guy that AOC was backing and was out cheerleading about. He's done. And Cori Bush is done. So I'm wondering, you know, Rashida's coming up. Granted, you know, her state's a little different, etc. But I'm kind of wondering here. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share. Rashida Tlaib could be the next one out. And then, of course, AOC, and we'll see. You know, the list goes on and on. But if they're going to be out, what does that tell you about the presidential race as well? It tells me that these people are too radical for America right now. America doesn't want radical. America wants law and order. America wants a strong economy. America wants respectability and the ability to have freedom of speech and talk to one another and share ideas, etc. And on the other side, you have sort of the antithesis of this. And you saw it again on display just in this rally that she did. I mean, we're going to talk in this show today about how desperately they want to shut down speech that they don't agree with. We've talked about this before many a time, but there's new evidence that just came out in which her team, Biden-Harris team, the tech division, the digital division at the White House, bragged about all the ways in which they could basically censor information. And they wanted to censor stuff that they considered misinformation or disinformation. And it was all according to them. I mean, as it usually is. That's how this stuff works, right? Hey, just a reminder, we're brought to you in part by our good friends over at American Hartford Gold. I was just out in the hills here shooting a little commercial for them. Watch. Hey everyone, I'm Trish Regan, and so happy to be coming to you live all week long from the stunning island of Ireland. Just incredible. You know, when I was a little kid and we'd visit here, my mom would say, if you're lucky enough, you might actually get a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, because that's where the leprechauns leave it. So we looked, we didn't find any, but I consider it probably having been good advice, because as I got older, I learned that gold is pretty valuable. It's valuable in terms of diversification. I encourage you to take a look at it, and when you do, call our friends, our wonderful sponsors over at American Hartford Gold. You can go to trishlovesgold.com, Trish loves gold, and wow, it's windy here. You can text 65532, my name, Trish, to 65532 for your chance to get up to $15,000 in free silver, ladies and gentlemen. Just a terrific offer. There we go. I was very proud of that. I mean, other than the fact that the wind was so incredibly strong. But you know what? That's Ireland. That's Ireland. And when you're on the cliffs, that's what you're going to get. I'm here for a family reunion, and it's been really, really extraordinary. And I've just heard so many great stories and gotten to meet so many great people. So just an incredible overall experience. And that's why there's some rusticness, shall we say, to the studio this week. Anyway, we thank our friends at Legacy Precious Metals. I want to talk to you about this next story. So we don't know Kamala Harris that well. Let's face it. I mean, we know the word salad. We know a little bit of her policy. She's pretty extraordinarily left on a lot of stuff, especially the trans stuff, especially, you know, some of the economic stuff. I mean, in my view, just what I've heard thus far. But here's something kind of interesting. She doesn't seem to have a ton of tolerance for people when they are shouting another viewpoint. In this case, she's out there trying to do a rally. Apparently it was a disaster. There were no buses to take people home. One of her staff members apparently was in tears. I mean, all kinds of crazy things happened. And so that shows you that she doesn't have the sophistication to run an operation like a big rally like that. But what was interesting to me was how quickly she was angered by this group and tells them basically to pipe down, right? You know, she's speaking. I am speaking now, says the Queen. Let's run this soundbite for you.
I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. I am speaking now. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
Wow, it's like she could be a grade school teacher. She could have been one of the nuns, right? Back in Catholic school. I'm speaking now. Don't you dare speak. Don't you dare. That was quite a clip to see. Kamala, I'm sorry. You're going to have to work on the je ne sais quoi. Maybe get a little bit of a sense of humor. Maybe actually start threading a couple of sentences together. We showed you some of the clips, some of the first things that she has done off script since getting the top gig here as the candidate for the Democrat Party. It has not gone well. And then you get that little moment where, again, she has to pivot. She's going off script. Otherwise, you get a prompter there right in front of you. She's reading right off the screen. Well, what does she do when somebody disagrees with her? She shuts them up. she shuts them up. Now, if that were Donald Trump, they'd make a big stink about that. Oh, the other side is not allowed to speak. These were some people that were very pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, anti-Israel. And so for them, like, it's never enough, right? Even though she's about as pro-Palestinian as you're going to find, it's still not enough. I mean, they were mad at the Squad, of course, because the Squad wasn't enough. It's never enough. It's never enough. So she just shuts them up by telling them, done, be quiet. I am speaking now. Well, that's not how it really can work. Unless, well, you're Kamala Harris and you think it can work that way. And if you're part of the Harris-Biden administration, as we've seen over the last nearly 4 years, they just shut up whatever they don't want to hear. And this has now been unveiled. Fascinating discussion was just uncovered. Apparently there was a Zoom meeting and they had a bunch of people from the Biden-Harris team, the digital team on this thing. The people talked about how they went about censoring the information that they considered misinformation or disinformation. This is pretty alarming. And I'm going to tell you, Walz is part of this camp too, as is Kamala. And that's the danger we run. But let's go first to one of these guys who's basically saying that, he thinks that the best thing in the world that the DNC could have ever done was they created a team that would go out and detect information they considered misinformation all over the internet, and then they would work to take it down. And they actually created a program where it could do this stuff automatically, and then it would be taken down. Let's go to this. This is Rob Flaherty, I believe, the digital director, again, caught on tape here, the Zoom meeting, which is quite enlightening.
One of the smartest things that I think the party did itself was over the last couple of years, they actually invested in a team that Tim runs, and you'll hear from Tim, to detect and track misinformation and misinformation narratives in the sort of various corners of the internet, and then actually go out and flag it to platforms as a violation of their policy. And so that work, I mean, the stuff that they did was a critical asset. That piece of infrastructure, I think, was one of the more important decisions that was made in sort of the party space over the last couple of years.
Kind of concerning. I mean, wouldn't you consider that a little bit concerning? Because again, like, who are they to say what they believe is misinformation? Consider this. I mean, we were talking about how Joe Biden was so fragile and his mental state seemed to be deteriorating in real time, but they considered that misinformation. That was nothing but a bunch of cheap fakes until, of course, it wasn't, until they decided suddenly you should know about that. Well, that is kind of alarming. But look, we lived through it. And here's this lady who's on the call with them, Becca something, talking about, yeah, this was part of the misinformation that was circulating. All that stuff about the decline in Biden's mental acuity. Listen to her say this, guys.
We saw a huge amount of volume and a lot of impact on narratives like Joe Biden was being manipulated by the radical left and disinformation around his mental acuity.
Okay. So I get it. Like, it's misinformation when they don't agree with it or it's hurtful to their political campaign. But if they actually deem it appropriate and necessary, they'll lean in, and they'll lean in hard. And that's exactly what they did with Joe Biden. I mean, they took the guy out. That was a good old-fashioned coup. Any which way you slice it, that was a coup, ladies and gentlemen. They took him out. They decided when it was okay to do that. So suddenly you could get through. It was no longer the censorship of before. But this was going on over on Facebook, where we are live right now. So we hope this is coming to you on Facebook. But let's see the email that was sent by Rob, the guy that you just heard from, talking to his Facebook friends. And he's all freaked out, actually, about a couple of my former colleagues. Lord knows what they had to say about me back during March 2020 when I was calling out some of the shutdown stuff and the COVID stuff. But anyway, this is the guy who's the director of digital strategy for the White House, Rob Flaherty. And he writes in this email, since we've been on the phone, the top posts about vaccines today happens to be Tucker Carlson saying they don't work. Yesterday it was Tommy Lahren saying she won't take one because she was sort of making the point that it's her body, she can make the decision, right? I mean, which actually I've heard from the left before. Anyway, he goes on to say, this is exactly why I want to know what, quote, reduction actually looks like. If reduction means pumping our most vaccine hesitant audience with Tucker Carlson saying it doesn't work, then I'm not sure it's reduction. So in other words, they had this whole reduction plan, and then when companies weren't following it, then it became a problem. Now, on the one hand, sure, Facebook's a private company. They can have whatever they want on their platform, and they have certain rights to say, we don't want this, that, or the other, unless we actually decide to think about it differently and say that, you know, the internet that they're operating on is really just information highway stuff, and they have to keep those roads open, in which case we can have that discussion, right? And I think that's a worthwhile discussion to have as well. But we know they're a private company. Here's the thing. The government has no right to jump in like that. The government has no right to jump in like that. And that's where you're starting to see a lot of trouble, because we do have this little thing called the First Amendment, even though some people in the Biden-Harris White House and the new VP pick don't want to honor it. This is incredible, guys. Tim Walz was caught on tape. We've got the, you know, good thing about the internet, good thing about tape is we still got it. Here he is. I want you to see this soundbite of him basically saying that you don't have a right to share information if it's not correct information, or if it's disinformation. Remember now, these are the guys that are deciding what's right, what's not right. They were the ones that said it was misinformation and disinformation and nothing but a bunch of Russian you-know-what to go after Biden on his age or mental acuity. Well, here's none other than Kamala's pick saying you don't have a right to your First Amendment.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
And this is going to be the team in charge? Are you kidding me? We have to be really careful about this slippery slope. You have none other to look down to our southern neighbors there in Venezuela. I've spoken with sources on the ground who tell me they worry that the country is on the brink of civil war there. They have, the AG, the Attorney General, has actually demanded an investigation into Maria Corina Machado, who was leading the opposition, is still leading the opposition. She's had to go into hiding, as well as Eduardo Gonzalez, who was the man that most of the world believes actually won that election. But Maduro is keeping all the power for himself, and he's squashing any of the dissidents. He's not allowing any of that information to come out. When I see the guy who might be the vice president saying, oh, you don't have a right to that information, and I see that the digital team from the Biden White House was actually trying to shut down the narrative that Joe had gotten a little too up there in age and was not maybe the spring chicken he once was, and his mental acuity had started to deteriorate. The fact that they were trying to suppress that story until they weren't, I mean, come on. This is pretty alarming stuff, I just got to say. And it's one of the reasons why we have to be really, really, really careful just exactly what we get ourselves into in this moment in time. It's actually one of the reasons why I created my own company, 76 Research, alongside a longtime, very dear friend, Rob Horton, who's a brilliant stock picker, by the way, just absolutely brilliant. In fact, I was looking at our model portfolios. I looked at them, actually. I'm here in Ireland, and I'm way ahead of you on the time zone, which is 5 hours anyway. So I'm looking at all the futures market and all the stuff that's going on market-wise from this side of things, and obviously a little bit ahead of the curve because of the time right now. And I was just blown away. I called him and I said, Rob, this is so fantastic because it's exactly what we wanted to do. And I was looking at our model portfolios and how much they have beaten the S&P. It's really pretty extraordinary, but I wouldn't steer you wrong. And Rob has been a longtime friend, and both of us have spent a good amount of time talking about sort of the inequity in the system and how lacking we are, or just everyday folks are, of real research that has some integrity and that is really designed to help you over a long period of time really create real wealth. I mean, this is wealth formation. And I don't care. I know that, you guys are like, oh, I can't do this. I don't have any extra money to invest. I'm telling you, I don't care what it is. If it's just $5 a week, think about just putting $1 a day. Hey, we got you up to $7, right? A week. into a smart investment portfolio, this will pay off for you in the long run. Look, inflation is going to keep going up. I think that's pretty much guaranteed, especially if the Fed cuts rates again. We can talk about gold in a minute again for that reason. And so in this sort of very trepidatious and uncertain economic environment, you want to make sure that you are taking care of yourself and your family. So go over to 76 Research, 76research.com. Look at the model portfolios, 10 to 15 stocks in each one of them. You can get all that research at a fraction of the cost of what it would be I mean, honestly, this model is totally different what we're doing, because typically in the financial research industry, you spend tens of thousands of dollars on an analyst like Rob and you get his report. And I said, forget that. You know what? I have this wonderful group of people that so deserve this. And we need to do what we can to help people. So why not just give it to everyone cheap, and we'll just completely upend the whole model. So that's my intention. That's what we're doing. And I'm proud to say our model portfolios are way up. So that's some really, really good news in light of everything that's going on. But talking about misinformation, you know, you think about what's happening even here sort of in my neck of the woods. If you look at what's going on in Great Britain right now, they've had obviously some real challenges on the immigration front. There was a situation with the Taylor Swift birthday party recently, and as a result of that tragedy, there are riots breaking out in the UK, considerable riots. And so what is the answer to this? Somehow the answer is not to share any of the video of the riots and to actually just sort of shut it down. In fact, Sky News in the UK is telling people don't share these videos, because if you share them, you will be prosecuted. I mean, think about that. They have a totally different standard. They don't have the First Amendment like we do. But I think this is pretty darn alarming, and I want to share this clip with you. This is from Sky News. Watch.
I'm joined by Matthew Thompson now to talk through this. So, Matthew, the last point there is crucial, isn't it? Some people might be sharing simply to warn their friends, but it could be considered an offence because they're amplifying this.
Absolutely, and that's the key message, is that however you think you're acting innocently on social media, whatever platform it is, you're just sharing something for whatever reason, that could potentially be a criminal offence. And look, it's not an idle threat either, because the Crown Prosecution Service were keen to point out that they've made a number of charges in relation to stirring up of racial hatred online, one of which this morning was for distributing a recording that could, intending to stir up racial hatred. And so they are actually already bringing charges in relation to this sort of thing. So it's a very, very clear message based in the harsh reality, if you like, that if you do this kind of thing, you are potentially committing a criminal offence. There he said it. They've got teams of people scouring the internet looking for this sort of thing. And if you are in the business of sharing or retweeting, whatever platform it might be, potentially criminal material, well, then you could find yourself prosecuted.
I mean, it's wild, isn't it? Is that not wild, guys? And granted, it's the UK, but when you consider what we just heard from the Biden-Harris tech team, the digital team, about how they would suppress stuff, when you heard from Tim Walz, the vice presidential pick of Kamala Harris, about how you don't have a right to your First Amendment if it's disinformation, and then you consider, what do they consider disinformation? I mean, I think this is pretty darn concerning. Really, really concerning. Heck, I don't know. Am I even allowed to share that clip? I better be. All the more reason for you to like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. Make a comment. Every little bit helps right now. Every little bit helps. I think we got to worry about just exactly what our rights are in terms of the First Amendment. And I see this escalating in the near future considerably. I want to turn, we were just talking about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is responding to those threats on her concert in Vienna. Really disturbing, obviously. Pretty tough stuff. A couple of teenagers playing some roles in that. Apparently they were corrupted online, they were radicalized online, and they had a pretty horrific situation that was planned for those concerts. And so thankfully this was discovered, and the Vienna State Police Director has come out and announced that there's these two teenagers, I believe a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, that had sworn allegiance to ISIS. They were captured by federal and state police. So that's the good news. Taylor Swift, she responded pretty immediately, or at least her production company that was handling this tour. So they came right out and they canceled the tour, that at least the part that they were doing there in Austria. And we don't know yet if she's going to continue the tour in the UK. She does actually have some concerts planned in the London area next week. And so we'll see whether or not she goes through with those. I imagine that security is really, really tight. I was thinking about this even within the context of what just happened with Donald Trump and the assassination attempt there, because I would imagine that any of these things, whether it be a sporting event, whether it be a rock concert, and we've seen obviously that concerts have been targets before, whether it be a political event, you're now just so incredibly vulnerable, both as the performer or as the political person or as the audience. And this is just the new reality, and it's sad to see, but we're all thankful that the police did their job there in Austria, and we hope that they can do their job a little better in the US. I'm still reeling from that because I think there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of everything that went down, the fact that they knew, the FBI, well, they should have known, the sniper team, counter sniper team was not actually acting the way they should have in terms of being able to take out that kid. That's pretty disturbing stuff. I mean, I don't know what they're really going to tell us ultimately. I think that there are still a lot of questions, and I'd like to get to the bottom of that. I have a feeling, unfortunately, that the more questions we ask, if it's the Harris administration, we'll run into some dead ends, because this will be just something they don't want to talk about. And if they can label it misinformation or disinformation, then they're able to shut down these stories. And that's a real concern. Anyway, this Tim Walz guy, I mean, we talked about him briefly the other day. I think he was the most stupid pick you could have come up with if you were Kamala Harris. I mean, I would have at least breathed a little bit of a sigh of relief for the country. I say this because, you know what, like, at the end of the day, all I care about as an American patriot is that we have the best team in place. And even if you're picking from a lousy bunch, in this case, I would have rather seen Shapiro in the spot than somebody like Walz. I mean, all things being equal. And that's because he has more of a realist view and take on the world than somebody like Walz, who's like living in Waltz land, right? Doing his little Waltz dance. You know, like, this guy, he's like just living in La La Land, like dreamland, really. And you think about the deterioration, for example, of Minnesota, which one of my producers at Fox, actually, a wonderful, wonderful woman. We got to get her on the show one of these days because I'm sure she'd have a lot to say about this. She'd be so terrific. Anyway, she used to tell me, because she grew up there, how Minnesota was such a wonderful, safe place. There were a lot of Swedish immigrants there, and they kind of had the best of everything. But they were so naive in their understanding of, you know, okay, well, let's share this with everyone. They were very welcoming of immigrants from a very different kind of culture, specifically Somalia. I mean, if you look at the flag, this is not misinformation. I don't have it to show you right now, but we've done the story in the past. They actually redesigned the Minnesota flag, and it looks very, very kind of eerily similar to a flag from Somalia, shall we say. So her viewpoint on this was that the people that lived in Minnesota were a little naive. And they catered to this group of immigrants thinking, okay, we'll just, you know, share the wealth, et cetera. And it didn't really work out as they had hoped. And so Minnesota consequently went from being a really economically prosperous place with a lot of safety to a whole lot more challenges, right? So Minneapolis, I mean, these are cities that are not what they once were when it comes to safety and prosperity, et cetera. And so you can kind of look at Walz and say, gee, you know, what role has he played in this? He's very socialist. He's very left. He's all about trans rights, et cetera. He's all about, you know, look, there's nothing wrong with green energy. I actually welcome all sources of energy. I really do. I'm a big believer, and you got energy, we'll take it. But let's be realistic about it. Let's not penalize an entire group of people because somebody in the White House has an in with some green energy makers and they're trying to promote a certain agenda. But, you know, this Tim guy, he's weird. He's got some ideas on how we can just go totally green at the U.S. Navy. All you have to do is use algae. That'll power everything. Here's a clip of him talking about it.
The Pentagon is not a bunch of green tree huggers. The Pentagon understands it's a risk to the climate, it's a risk to the environment, and it's a national security issue. They're trying to create the Great Green Fleet where we power our Navy using algae.
And he's a big believer in that. So he's pushing his talking points and he's trying to sell that. I just think that these things are so much more nuanced. And while I'm a big believer in green energy, in fact, if it were a clearer day, you might even be able to see some windmills behind me here in Ireland. But, you know, while that's great, and while we should embrace as much energy as possible, including all the clean stuff and all the green stuff, et cetera, we just need to be respectful of all the different issues on the table. This was where, let's face it, our government went really wrong in March 2020. They were refusing to consider the psychological impact on young people, on kids, of being out of school for so long. Incidentally, this guy's state was one of the schools that was closed down for a really long time. He tries to tell you 10 days, but it was more like 5-6 months that they were out of school in Minnesota. So you have just sort of a disadvantage from that standpoint that nobody was thinking about. Didn't think about the kids and the psychological trauma that they would be going through having a shutdown society. Nobody thought about the economic implications. I kept saying, you know, you've got to have more people at the table, but instead you got people with a very vested interest. Fauci, I'm looking at you. And so you had all the scientists with their interests only guarding their territory, and the right hand's not talking to the left hand. So sure, let's figure out how algae can help, but let's also make sure that we've got the wherewithal to be able to meet any kind of challenge militarily here in our country, or there. You know, I'm in Ireland today, but that's just the reality of it. And so when people get so myopic about green energy, they're not thinking through the entire equation. I mean, hey, lithium batteries are a great example. Where are you going to get the lithium batteries? I guess you can go to China. That puts you at a national security risk. You might be able to go down to some mining places in South America, maybe over in Afghanistan. Again, security risks, national security risks all day long. You could probably go out to Nevada. I believe there's a lithium mining spot there, but look at what you're doing to the environment. I mean, you're really hurting the environment. So it's like, pick your poison, guys. Nothing's perfect. Why not just be sensible and have a lot of everything, and then you can hopefully be playing it safe. Speaking of playing it safe, you know, diversification is a big part of my philosophy when it comes to investing. It's a big part of what Rob and I talk about at 76research.com. And I think it's something that you really need to think about as we go into these dicier times, if you would, regardless of who wins. Look, the reality is we got 35 trillion and counting in debt, ladies and gentlemen. And that number is only going to get bigger unless someone's like a wizard and they're able to just, you know, wipe it all away. I do think that we're going to be in a situation where increasingly you see us inflating our way out of debt. And when you inflate your way out of debt, that comes with serious consequences to an economy and to the people that are saving their money. So your dollar goes down in value. It's why I encourage you to think about gold in your diversification strategy. And when you do, I want you to call my friends over at American Hartford Gold. Look, they're in here twice today. You can call them at 1-844-495-1115. You can get up to $15,000 in free silver. So a really terrific offer from them. All you have to do is text Trish, my name, to 65532. Again, just text Trish to 65532. You can also go to, how do you like this? TrishLovesGold.com. I know you won't forget that. TrishLovesGold.com. Again, for your chance to get up to $15,000 in free silver, or take out your phone, text them right now, Trish to 65532. So we got some really aggressive lefties that want to take over the country. And, you know, if you had any doubt about it, this Fox host put it right out there on display, calling him kind of a funny name, Tim Walz, because of what he's been trying to do to sort of create this equal environment for transgenders, which means, you know, you can use whatever bathroom you want. And there was a little bit of a ruckus over his implementation of feminine hygiene products in the boys' rooms in schools in his state. This Fox host had a few things to say about it. In his defense, I want you to listen.
It does matter.
Thinks he's a coward.
That's not true, and this has come up before in past elections. Okay. Moving on to what I think was one of the more potent points, or I know will be one of the major plot lines in all of this.
Tampon Tim?
Tampon Tim. Yes, I would like to talk about it.
Good.
You know what? If you knew anything about the pink tax or how difficult it is for women when they have their period and they don't have access to tampons.
It's not about
pads.
women. They can get as many tampons as they want.
That's not
Give them free tampons. It's the boys.
I want to hear this. Go ahead.
The point of having menstrual products available in a boys' bathroom is for 4th to 12th graders, I think, that if there is someone who identifies, if there is a biological female who identifies as a male and uses that, your laughing will be the undoing of your side. I'm telling you that, Jesse.
It is but I highly doubt that.
Okay.
You're letting your encouraging empathy, which we all admire, go into an irrational world.
You don't admire it. I need to say something
no
about
one
the National Guard.
is using the boys' bathroom that's menstruating, Jessica.
That's not.
All right, we have to move on, Jessica.
No.
It's now we're 15 minutes in.
Not because of me.
I'm not blaming you.
Well.
Oh, goodness gracious. So Tim Walz is really taking the trans stuff too far. But what's fascinating about this is how they'll try and lean on this idea that, oh, it's economically challenging for women, it's a pink tax, etc. And to Jesse's point, that has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with putting these products in a boys, like what was it again, like 4th through 12th grade, in a boys' restroom. It's really about something else entirely. And I think it's very disturbing that this guy wants to normalize so much of this. Because again, that's like 0.001% of the population, which they're trying to make like 0.005. They're trying to get a political point across. They're trying to divide and conquer again. And they're using this issue to try and divide. And that is something that we as Americans need to wake up to, that we need to call out over and over and over and over again. I mean, what a pathetic dude. So I was watching him and I noticed he kind of had some weird movements. And I thought maybe it was just me, like maybe I'm being too sensitive to it. Maybe I just really don't like him and that's getting in the way. And then I caught this clip of Jesse and I want to show you. I'm like, wait a second. No, it's not just me. He's got a new nickname for him. Twitchy Tim. Take a peek.
A lot of red flags, but one is glaring. His body language. Here's Twitchy Tim on stage, waving profusely in a very unsettling manner. Very unsettling. Men should not move this way. It's not the way we move. And the handshake is probably the most telling. This is Walz and his wife shaking hands like business associates, followed by a weird hug. Now let's compare that to Walz's interaction with Kamala's husband, Doug. Interesting. What's going on here?
Wow. Yeah, Jesse, I'm a D-list cable guy, right?
You're not.
Well, all right, maybe C.5 list.
Okay.
The point being that I sometimes get invited to speaking events across the country like you are.
Yes.
Right? And when I'm done, my wife usually comes with me because it's kind of a mini vacation.
Yeah.
And I give her a hug and a kiss because you met Mrs. C. And,
yes.
I'm a lucky guy. I'm not shaking her hands like I'm at a State Farm convention, right? But that's what we saw here with Tim Walz. Some may call this weird. That's the only adjective that comes to mind
And
right
the
now.
hug is not the way you hug your wife. You hug your wife from the body. You don't hug like this.
Yeah.
Different than he hugged Doug.
It was very sumo wrestling-like almost, right?
He was going to take him out.
Yeah, but boy, he liked
He
Doug
loves
there.
Doug. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, you've seen Jill in the same embrace.
The nanny loved Doug.
Yeah.
See, Joe went there. Joe's great, by the way, Joe Concha, by the way, and Jesse Waters, one of the good ones. Yeah, he went there. So apparently that's all come up. I'm telling you guys, in time, you're going to get more and more opposition research. And the opposition research is really going to be destructive, in my point of view, for both of these candidates on the left. What's so concerning is that there's not a lot of time. There's just not a lot of time between now and November. I do think that as more Americans come to terms with just exactly who he was or isn't regarding his, say, military career, you're going to have more problems. As well as Kamala. But first on Mr. Walz here, Governor Walz, apparently he did not retire as a command sergeant major E9 despite claiming otherwise. He apparently retired as a master sergeant E8. This is reportedly And Breitbart has actually been out in front of some of this reporting, so we'll give them credit for that. For apparently having failed, according to Breitbart, to complete the requirements for securing the higher rank. And there was this video clip you see that was posted by the Harris campaign as soon as they announced that Walz was coming on board. And he's heard claiming in this that he carried, quote, weapons of war in war. However, he was never actually deployed to war. He was never actually in a combat zone throughout his 24 plus years in the Army National Guard. So that's kind of a problem, right? Like right off the gate, he's got some claim, and he's actually been, I guess, pushing this claim to voters, and for whatever reason that hasn't been fully vetted. So that's come out right now. He did serve 24 years in the American Army National Guard, but he actually was never deployed to war. He was never deployed to combat in war. He retired as a master sergeant in 2005, shortly before his unit deployed to Iraq. And that's a big issue too, because people are upset. They're like, wait a second, Tim Walz is out there saying that, you know, he was carrying weapons of war, etc., but he actually chose not to go to Iraq when his unit was deployed. So there's some people that are kind of bitter, understandably, about that, and they think he's inflating his war record. So again, more will come out on that. But opposition research, it could be tough. I mean, certainly on Kamala. And I suspect the Trump team has some stuff coming your way in terms of some of this oppo research. I mean, one of the things that has come out, right, is her dating past. And I guess she dated a few, what do they say? You date a few lemons before, I don't know the expression, you guys know it better than me, but she dated some sort of rather interesting, and that's a delicate way of saying it, people including my former neighbor. He actually lived in our apartment building that would be the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, who was married at the time and was dating her. And she also dated this guy. He's a talk show host, Montel Williams, and he's now making the cable rounds, perhaps trying to capitalize on her success a little bit, and, you know, melting down. He's like near tears. This is the ex-boyfriend, you guys, Montel Williams, going on CNN, totally like on the verge of tears because our country is, you know, on the verge of something really awful if Kamala, his ex-girlfriend, doesn't win. Take a peek.
All these different things that he wasn't, and McCain said, hold on a second, no, he's a decent man, I just disagree with his policies.
It's her tenor. The tenor is, let's unite, not divide. It's time to have more conversations, even like the ones we're having right here. Though I've disagreed with what you've said, we've disagreed. We've also kind of just slightly realized that we could turn that beach ball just a little bit and see a different panel, see a different point of view.
Commonality.
She is really focused on trying to make America understand that what unites us is far greater than what divides us as a mass, and we ought to pay attention to those people on the fringes who are taking away the wrong message, those people who have some form of mental illness who are taking away the wrong message, saying that if my side doesn't win, then burn the whole thing down. We can't do this. We've got to remember, you know, folks like me, and we've probably got 40 million veterans alive. The majority of them put their hand up in the air and said, I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Period. That's what we believe in. That's why I put a uniform on. To protect this for your generation, for your generation. Let's start focusing on how we protect this and stop firing up those idiots who really think that they can. Because at the end of the day, what do you want? You want to eat out of a garbage can? Because that's what's going to happen. If we go to a civil war, remember, more deaths in the American Civil War than any other conflict since.
Brother against brother.
We're going to do it again.
So what exactly is he trying to suggest there? That we're going to civil war if she doesn't win? I mean, look, I think you got to be really careful with this language. Montel, I know I suggested it several years ago. The left was all over me. How could I even suggest such a thing? And by the way, I made a very clear point to say I wasn't talking about a civil war with generals and stuff, where people were literally killing each other. I was talking about a civil war of culture, of economics, of social issues. And I think we're there, frankly. And I'm hopeful that at least our side of things gets to have a little bit of a say, a little bit of a voice. Reminder, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. Because there's an effort underway to completely suppress what I think, what you probably think, all in the name of protecting against disinformation, protecting against possibly the violence of a civil war, which no one's calling for, Montel. No one's calling. That's you, buddy. That's you. Because you want to get your gal pal elected. I mean, she was like one of two at the time. I think we saw that red carpet video, and he introduces her along with the other girlfriend, I guess, on his arm. You know, why have one when you can have two? I'm looking at your comments, and you guys are funny. You guys are funny. Anyway, Mike, it's good to have you back. Peace of mind as well. Thomas, Don, good to see you. Don, I think you're overseas in Europe as well, and has been such a committed member here on this platform. It's really, listen, all I can say is there is a lot at stake. I don't disagree with Montel on that aspect of things. There is a lot at stake, but I certainly hope that we can live in a world where everybody can have a voice. And I'm not convinced that that's the world you live in under a Harris-Walz administration. Walz told you, I played you the clip early in the show. Go back and listen if you didn't hear it. It's in like the first quarter of the show. Walz said, we have it on tape, that he doesn't think you have the right to the First Amendment if you're promoting disinformation. Well, what is disinformation? Stuff they don't like. And then I played you a clip talking, you know, the Biden-Harris digital team, where they actually said they felt that anything that questioned Biden's age and mental acuity was actually an issue of disinformation, misinformation. So they want to write all the rules, and you think about it, and that puts us in a very bad spot. We do have this little thing called the Constitution. We do have this little thing called the First Amendment. And this stuff matters, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, make sure you comment, and make sure you stay vigilant in this environment for sure. It is wonderful to have you here. I'll be back again tomorrow live with the Irish Sea behind me. Can't beat that, right? Can't beat that. I'll see you tomorrow.